YouTube, it's Christopher. We're going to quickly, as quick as we can anyway, we're going to change out the American Ultra bridge in this 70th Anniversary Ultra Strat, and we're going to replace it with this Vega-Trem. Now, Vega-Trem was kind enough to give me this, to do this surgery. And here's all the things that you need in order to make this happen. So in the package, they'll give you the 2-point screws that you use to mount the hardware. There's a set of American adapters that go into the threaded inserts so that your Vega-Trem screws will fit. Obviously, you need your Vega-Trem, and I am dangerously holding this above this body. Knock on some wood. Here's the Vega-Trem plate. It's got the 2 little grooves in here that this will sit in. You have these 2 little blade edges, here and here, that sit in these grooves. And that's what provides the motion. So now, those are the things we need. We also need the springs. I'm going to use a medium tension. We also need a new set of strings. On this guitar, I was using 9.5 to 44 D'Addarios. What I'm hoping here is that this will go nice and smooth, very quick. Let's get to it. So I'm just going to put this stuff aside because first of all, we have to swap out the old bridge. We got to take the strings and the old bridge off, and then we can put everything we need from the Vega-Trem into the guitar, quickly get it set up, and we're going to go through all of that right now. So I'm going to preface this by saying I have already swapped the screws in the Vega-Trem that set the height. I utilized these. So these are the old screws that came out of the Vega-Trem. They're quite long. The ones that come with the bridge, in my opinion, are too long and they dig into your palm when you're doing palm muting. So Vega-Trem, if you're seeing this video, you should really either switch to using these or put an extra set in the kit. They only cost $5. That's why I don't mind buying them myself. But man, it would be great if I already had the option, because I have to do that on every Vega-Trem that I've replaced. So of course, in the instructions here, they tell you over here which set of springs to utilize. In the packaging, they give you a set of high tension, medium tension, low tension, and extra low tension. I'm going to try to use the medium tension, which is supposed to be used for 10s, but I'm using 9.5s. Hopefully they'll work for that. Of course, I've got the tremolo bar here for the Vega-Trem. What I've also got, and this is something that used to come with the Vega-Trems and doesn't anymore, but I still have one from the original sets. This is a lithium grease. Any kind of lithium grease will work. What I'm going to utilize this for is in a couple of places. I'm going to put it on the grooves in the Vega-Trem, and I'm also going to put it in the nut slots on my nut, just to allow everything to move freely. I'm also going to put it on the tremolo arm down here so that it stays lubricated. All right, having said that, let's get to work here. We're going to start taking off the original equipment in the Fender guitar. Okay, so let's get these strings loosened up. First off, okay, next step is in the back. Flip this over, get these screws out. Okay, so all we really need to do here is take the old springs out. And now I like to just very carefully hold the bridge, flip the guitar over, and now all we got to do is take this off, pull it straight out, unlock the locking tuners, and we just take these screws out. So I just cut off an end of the old strings, and the reason I did that is I'm going to lubricate this Vega-Trem piece in the slots here and here with some grease before I put it on the body. And what that'll do is it'll provide me with enough lubrication for a long time. But you want to make sure that this is lubricated. So here I'm just going to take a little bit of grease from this, get it on there. I'm not sure if you can see that or not. Gosh, I am very bright skinned here. So I'm going to put that over here for now. You take this guy and you simply put it in the groove. Just rub it back and forth in there. If you get a little mess, it's okay. You just want to make sure that groove is lubed up. Same with the other side, that it has enough grease in it to keep it lubed. And that should do it. I'm going to put a tiny bit more. It kind of ran out on the other side. Put a little bit in there like that. And you can wipe excess off like this. You get a little bit on you. It's all right. All right. So now we can put this aside. All right, so we need these American adapters. And you'll see there's, on one side, there's a groove. Maybe you can see that in the video, I hope. There's a little groove cut in the top. That has to face up. The other side faces down. And you simply just thread these into the guitar threads or post threads here. And what you want to do when you put these in is just get them flush or just slightly less flush than the top of the body. That way your plate will sit flush against the body. You don't want the plate to be higher than the body, because there we go. Those are below the surface of the body. So now I can take the 2-point screws here. We got the 2-point screws. Along with the tools that you need for the bridge. We'll keep those to the side here. That's very cool. And now all you got to do is make sure that your grooves are facing out towards the bridge. Chuck this dude on there. One screw. It's just a Phillips head. Thread that right into the adapter that you just put in. Be careful that you don't cross thread. So this has no play, really. If you loosen this up, it doesn't move. So you can tighten this part down right away. Okay, so that's installed. That's all done. So the next part that I like, the way that I like to do this is I'll take the main unit now and I'll put the springs in. Okay, so we're going to place this gently here. I've got my springs. You're going to need the smaller Allen wrench for this. And I've already done so, but you want to make sure these screws are a little bit loosened so that you can insert the springs and the spring will go past the screw. So that's in. That one's in. And now all you have to do is just move this out of the way a little bit. A lot of people get confused by this, but all you got to do is move that over. Tighten this little screw. You don't have to go ham on it. You can just go finger tight like that and push this back over. That's all you got to do. This one's already over. We're going to get this one. Tighten it up. Push it back over. That's it. Some people get very mad that they can't get the screw in now, but that's not the purpose. The purpose is just to keep these from pulling out. That's enough tension on there to keep them from popping out. So now that's done. The next thing you need to do is take the two E strings out of the package and put them in the bridge. So now once you have that, you can take this and put it in the body of the guitar with the strings on it as it is, and the springs as it is. You just go in this way first. So this goes in, you lift the back of the body, the bridge goes through. Now you hold the bridge in the back. I'm holding it with my other hand underneath. My cat, of course, thinks that these strings are for him. So he's down there trying to murder them. But you simply just flip this over. And now in the back. So now we're just going to attach this to the claw. Like so. We're going to leave the one for now. I'm going to turn this over. You can see that this is up in the air and it doesn't really want to sit where it is until you have some tension on it. So it's going to sit kind of goofy like that until you get a little bit of tension. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put both of the E strings into the tuners and put some tension on them. And that should start to bring the bridge up, sitting in the body. And now you can start adding tension to both the low E and the high E. And so now that they're bent on the saddles, right? So the strings are going this way. This is when you want to align your bridge, because it can move left or right. See that? I can move this bridge left and right. And what that allows me to do is accurately locate the strings to where they should be on the neck. And in this bridge's case, it's right about there. So now that I have that in place, I can flip this over and not worry about it moving. I can hook up the other spring. And now I can, actually I'm going to move the table, or no, I think I can leave it here. So now I got to put the rest of the strings in. So of course I have to clear my table, so I had to move that over. So the rest of the strings now have to be loaded. Okay, flip that over. Get our strings in the tuner. Okay, now I just use my cutters and cut off the excess strings up top. Now I'm going to put some tension on the strings, and this should come up. I should also say that this is a good time to put your bar in. Make sure that it's sitting in the grooves. And also one last check to make sure your strings are where they're supposed to be. So it's in. So now we can, what I like to do is I like to pull this so that the bridge is flat. Then I can put tension on the strings. So now I'm going to hook up my tuner up to the headstock, and I'm going to start to try to get these strings to where they are eventually going to stay, which is an E standard. Okay, so that's pretty much close to E standard, and you can see the bridge is way angled back. So I have to either loosen these springs, or I'm going to have to go with a different tension spring in the back. And I think by looking at these springs, you know, there's no gap really in these springs. They're barely being used. So I think what I need to do is I need to switch these out for a set of low tension strings. But the other thing I can do too is I can see if angling these springs will help. So let's try that first. Not enough for this to be able to come up to where it's going to need to be. So we still have a little bit left in the up pull, I think. Let's see. Yes, no, they don't. So you see what's happening here is if I go all the way back, those springs lose their tension completely. You cannot have that in a spring tension system like that. They cannot go completely loose. So I'm going to have to swap out these springs for lower tension ones and hope that I can get enough tension to keep it in tune. So let's go try that. I'm going to pause you out real quick. Okay, so I've got a set of extra low tension springs here. We're going to see how they do. I'm going to swap these out one by one. Okay, so extra low tension. We're going to check. The bridge should be, it's in a much different spot now, but strings are completely flattened. So I know that I'm going to have to tighten these springs up quite a bit in the back. So let's do that. Okay, so the bridge is now sat back a little. So now we're going to check the tuning. So the thing about a floating bridge is as you tune one string and then move to the next, you add tension, the string that you already tuned is going to drop tension because it pulls against the springs in the back of the guitar. So this becomes a balance of check and recheck. So now that's pretty much where I want the bridge to be as far as its level. Not sure if you can see that perfectly in the video or not, but that's fairly flat with a little up angle, and I'm still not in tune. So I'm going to add a little more tension to the springs. Go a couple turns probably. I like to make them equal distance from the body. Now we tune. Perfect. So the guitar is in tune and the bridge is flat where I want it to be. You see that? It's perpendicular. So the base of the bridge is perpendicular to the top of the body. And that's the goal. That's where you want it. So for this, the extra low tension worked. I still have a little bit more room if I have to. I have a set of 9.5 to 44 strings on this guitar, which is my preferred string gauge for using E standard with a tremolo. Now the next part of this is getting the action set, right? And the intonation set. So what we have to do that is on the bridge, you'll see there's screws in the front, which I've replaced with shorter ones. That's going to set my height. And then in the back, there's the same screws. It's the same size screw as this one, so you use the same tool. That screw butts up against this screw. And what you got to do is loosen this. You got to move the saddle back to where you want it using this screw in the back. So if you tighten that screw, it's going to pull the saddle back. If you loosen that screw, it pushes the saddle forward. And you have to get the optimal thing. You have to keep tuning, checking, coming back, tuning, checking again, and so forth. So let's get that started with setting the height of the strings. Okay, so I personally like to do string height first, and then I'll do intonation once I have my strings the way that I like them. So since we're going to be changing the height of the strings, we have to loosen these screws that hold down or lock down each saddle. So I'm just going to go ahead and loosen all of these up. Once they're loose, I'll just give them like a full turn on that so that each one has enough space that this saddle can move freely up and down. Because some of these I think are going to be a little low, and I think some of them are going to be a little high. So we'll see in a minute exactly where everything's supposed to be. But once you get these guys all loosened up, you can then start setting the height of each individual string to get perfect height on your strings. What I'm going to do to set my action is I do my E strings first. So I'll tune them to pitch, right? So that is not an E, I don't think. Let's go check that. Turn on my tuner. Okay, so that guy's an E. So what I like to do with my low E string is I'll play up around the 5th, 7th, all the way up to the 9th frets. And I'm getting a little bit of buzzing. It's not excessive. I am hitting the string pretty hard. Typically, you want the guitar to be up on its playing side to really set the height properly. What I'm going to do very quickly here is I'm going to double check, make sure my neck is still got the relief that I want. And it does. So my relief is still okay. It's a little bit relieved. What I like to do is I don't want it to be totally flat. I want there to be a little bit of a gap when I hold down a high fret and the 1st fret. I want there to be a little gap right around the 8th fret, in between the string and the fret. Not a big gap. You don't want it to be like the size of the string. That's a huge gap. You want it to just, so when you press on it, you can hear that it's coming down and making contact. You know there's a gap. So I'm going to try to move this down because by eye it looks a little bit higher than I like it. So to do that, this guy's already loosened, and plus I'm going down, so it doesn't matter really. But I'm just going to take, I don't know, a whole turn. So the key was this way. I'm going to bring it back 1, do the same thing with this one. So I start here, bring it back a whole turn like that. And of course I go counterclockwise, which brings the screw up in the saddle. So the saddle's actually lowering towards the body when you go counterclockwise. When you tighten that, it's going to bring the saddle up. So now I'm going to double check. I'm going to tune this to E again. Okay, now I'll play those frets. I'm still getting the same amount, but when I look, I think I can go another one. You want to do both equal, because what you want is for this saddle to be flat in where it's sitting. You don't want this side higher or that side higher. You want the saddle to be flat on the bridge plate with the same amount of space under each screw. So that looks much better to me. Let's double check the tuning. There's E. Because I lowered it, the tuning lowered as well. Right now I have that action right where I want it on the low E. I'm not gonna tighten this down yet. I'm gonna give it a little bit because I can see it's way up in the air in the back, so it doesn't have to be that loose. So what I like to do, since I know I'm gonna do intonation next, I like to tighten this and then loosen it again, because you don't want to have a massive gap when you're doing intonation. So it's tight right there. I'm just going to bring it back about a half. So now I know my screw is not going to prevent the saddle from moving when I adjust this in the back for intonation. If it's too high, what ends up happening is your saddle is way up in the air. You set your intonation, and then when you lock this, you push the saddle down, and the saddle actually moves back a little bit because you change the angle so much. So if you have just a little bit of loosening on this screw prior to doing your intonation, your movement of the saddle when you lock it down is going to be minimized. And that'll prevent the saddle from rocking itself out of intonation again. But of course, when you do intonation, and I'll get to this again later, you always want to lock it, then check it. And if it's not right, unlock it, move it, lock it, check it again. You always want to check with a locked saddle, because if you check it and it's right and then you lock it, it might change because you're pushing down the saddle. So you always want to lock before you check. That's going to happen later though. So there's my low E. My high E, I do this, right? So I like to make, hear that? Right about there, it's starting to fret out. So I know that string is too low. That's how I set my high E. It's fretting out. So I'm loose. I can give this some height. So I'm going to put this in, and I'm angled this way. I'm going to go one full turn clockwise. That will raise the saddle up. Okay, there's one. And this way. This is the second one. So now that's up. I got to check my tuning again. Because I raised the saddle up, the pitch will go up. Okay, so now I do my check again. So it's not fretting out now. So I know that that E string is about as low as it can go because I only did one turn, right? So that thing's going to be right where I want it to be, I think. I'm going to check the height by eye. It looks like what I would normally like. Now, I'm not the type of guy that does strict measurements. You know, you don't have to go by factory measurements. Personally, I go by feel and ear and sight, and my guitars always end up playing correctly. So again, because I moved that, I'm going to bring this down so that it locks into place on this saddle lock. There's locked. So now if I back it up about that much, I know that my intonation will work, no problem. So the way that I set the other four strings in the middle is I will basically, I'll put a capo on the 12th fret, which I got to go grab my capo, but I'll put a capo on the 12th fret, and then I'll just feel how far the string moves on my high E before it frets out. And I can already tell this B string is way too low. So isn't the G string. So is the D string, so is the A string. But I just go by feel. So holding down I don't need the capo, but holding down the 12th fret here, you can then gauge how far your good setup strings, and these are going almost the same distance. You want the rest of the strings to feel like that distance. It's tough to describe, but I think you kind of get the idea. So because I'm going up, I know that these strings are all too low. So I got to go clockwise with each screw. I'm going to start by going one full turn on each one. So there's one. There's one. And now I'll capo or fret the 12th fret, and I'll feel my high E. And then the B is closer, but it's not quite there. So I'm going to go about a half a turn. Before I do that, I'm going to make sure I have enough space. I'm going to loosen this guy a little more just to make sure I have the room for the saddle to go up. So I'm going to go a half a turn. So I want this to now point this way. So I go half turn. I do the same thing over here. Half turn. And now I'm going to fret and I'm going to check. It's still a little low, but I also want to get the string tuned. Because if you're not careful and you go too high, you could potentially damage your string, I suppose. I don't think you'll go that high. So there's my B. I'm going to fret again. Yeah, it's still too low. So I'm going to go another, I'll go a whole turn again. See what that does. So we'll go one whole turn. And then here another whole turn. Tune the string. Fret the 12th fret and I'll feel my high E. That's better. So now my B string is moving the same amount of distance to the fretboard as my high E string is. That's the way that I do it. Some people will tell you that's a little crazy, but that's just the way that I set my action, and it's always felt great. I've been doing this since the 80s, folks, since about 1989. I've been doing this kind of stuff. So I've been pretty lucky in that I've learned some of these techniques from some folks over the years. That B string feels pretty good. If I look down the neck, I know you can't see me doing this, but I'm sighting down the neck from behind the saddles just to double verify that it looks like it's gapped correctly, and it does. So the next thing is the G string. We're going to do the same thing. Now, what you should see is a very gradual climb from the low E string. The A string should be ever so slightly higher than the E, and then the D string should be ever so slightly higher than the A string, and then the G string should be just about the same as the D, and then the B should be lower and the E a tiny bit lower. And I am seeing that, with the one exception. The A string is a little bit low. I'm going to give it a half a turn. So I now have, and it's extremely difficult to see, especially in the camera. You know, I don't know if you can tell that there's a bit of a curvature to it. It's pretty flat. I'm sighting down the neck now. Oh, that looks wonderful. So this looks really good. So now what I like to do is I like to tune the whole guitar, make sure everything's in tune. And the reason that I need to do this is anytime you change the saddle height, it actually changes the amount of tension that each string has on the bridge. So if I had to put the saddles up from where they were originally, they're going to add tension to the bridge. And what that means is that the springs in the back are now being countered by the strings having that extra tension. So anytime you change the height of a saddle, you might have to change the springs in the back. Okay, so now I'm going to check the bridge, and it's a little bit more, it's going up a little bit. So I got to add some tension to the springs in the back because that is no longer flat. It's now angled up. So I got to flip the guitar over, add some tension to these springs, and that was 3/4 of a turn. 3/4 of a turn. We'll see how that does. I'm going to have to retune the guitar now because it should be all sharp. So the E string really stretched. So let's check the height now. Nearly flat. It's just got a tiny, tiny bit in the up direction. Not sure if you can see it in the video or not, but that guy's a little bit higher than the surface of the guitar as far as perpendicularity goes. So I am going to give this maybe another half a turn. So now I'm going to stretch the strings again a little bit. And there we go. Now the bridge is flat against the surface of the guitar, which is where I want it. So this is set up. Now the only thing that's left is I have to do the intonation down here. So let me grab my plug-in tuner, because you don't want to use a clip-on tuner for this. You want to use one that plugs in so that you'll get your accuracy. Hold on one second. Boom. So here we have, I'm using my Korg. It's plugged in. So we're going to do the intonation now. Okay, so to do that, as you remember, I've already got these guys loose by about half a turn or so. So we're going to use the small Allen wrench, which goes in the back here, to change the intonation. So first thing you got to do, in the way that you set intonation, if you're not aware, is you need to use the 12th fret harmonic and the 12th fret fretted note. And they should be the same on the tuner. So here, if I hit my harmonic, I'm in E. Now if I hold down my 12th fret, I'm flat. So because that note is flat, what that means is I have to make the saddle go towards the neck. If it was sharp, you pull away. So it's kind of the way that I remember that is if you have a sharp knife, you don't bring it close to your hand if it's sharp. You pull it away if it's sharp. That's how I remember in my head. So this guy has to go forward towards the neck in order for it to be intonated properly. So there's the harmonic. There's the fretted note. And obviously, the harder you push, you should technically be doing this from the playing position. Your guitar should be on your body when you do this. Unfortunately, that makes for an impossible video. So I have to kind of set it like this, but this is only for demonstrative purposes. You don't want to lay your guitar down flat when you're doing your intonation. You want to have a longer chord than I have here. You want your guitar on your body, and you want to do this intonation with the guitar on your body. But just so you can see how it's done, I'm doing it on the bench. So I'll end up doing this again later to double check. And sometimes you can get these weird readings that's still a little flat. So in order to make this go that way, I have to loosen the screw in the back. So here I'm just going to put the Allen wrench into the screw. There we go. And I'm going to loosen it ever so gently. And that's loosened. So now what I want to do is I'm actually going to loosen this screw a little bit just so that I know the saddle has moved forward, and I like to give it a little extra help back here, make sure, and then I'm going to lock it down. Okay, that's locked down now. So if it's perfect, I don't have to touch that ever again. So now I'm going to hit my 12th fret harmonic. Okay, there's the E. And then my fretted note. All right, so that's got to move a little bit again. So we're going to loosen this. We're going to loosen this. I'm going to give this a little push in the back. Then we're going to tighten this. There you go. You don't want to over tighten because you don't want to bend the saddle. So now we got to stretch the string a bit because it has moved. So the witness point, if you're aware, there's the angle of the string leaving the saddle or leaving another thing like the nut or the tuning post. That angle is called a witness point, and you want it to be 90 degrees leaving. You don't want the string to have a hump in it as it leaves. You want to make sure this is a good angle. Witness point is what that's called. You can Google that if you want, if you don't believe me. But here's a 12th fret harmonic. Okay, we're flat now. So tune this up a bit. And I'm tuning the guitar with the tuning peg, obviously. Still a little flat. Still a little flat. There's our E. So now the fretted note. And that's intonated. So you got E on both the fretted note and the harmonic note. Move on to the B, and we're going to do the same thing. So this is locked. I don't have to worry about the E string again. So moving on to the B string, I'm just going to make sure it's tuned. There's our B at the harmonic. That's pretty much where it needs to be, I think. It's a little sharp. That's the harmonic. So I'm going to try to bend this into tune. Yep, I've gone a little too far. I'm going to give it a tiny bit on the tuner. Oops. There's our B. Now our fretted note. That one's good. Again, I got to lock this down and recheck. So you always want to lock first, then check. That's one thing that's a must. So that's locked. Let's check it again. See how far that went? Just by bringing this saddle down in the back, it's changed my note. So I'm going to guess I got to change this again. So there's my B. All right, so now I got the B. Let's see, fretted. There we go. It's intonated. So that's locked down. I don't have to touch that again. We're going to move on to the G string. There we go. So we're intonated. So everything's set. That's all we got to do. And now we get to play.